I'm David Key, Director of Research with Minnesota Soybean. We're going to talk about the next three projects are all weed control projects. Two of them are specific to water hemp. Devlin Serenge submitted these set of slides. Herbicide resistant management research update for water hemp. When you look at water hemp and any weeds, you first need to identify the weak spots in the program. Let's see if I can figure out where. Identify the weak links, understand the biology. Don't rely on the single management technique. In fact, that's gotten to be for whatever kind of pest you're dealing with, whether it's a disease, an insect, four-legged critters, whatever. They all can adapt if you only have one single way of handling it. We're going to have to take a step back in history. Back when I first started in this business, we focused a lot on seed bank in the soil. How many seeds did you have in that soil? If you had fewer seeds, you had less of a weed problem. Along came Roundup resistance. We ignored it, sprayed it, completely ignored the seed bank, and we're now in trouble again. With water hemp, in the seed bank, we can do some tillage. Unfortunately, in Minnesota, and especially this part of North Dakota and Minnesota, you're not going to do a lot of tillage this time of year. The sweeps have a tendency to bounce off the soil when your soil gets frozen. In the spring, you can focus on pre-emergent herbicides. When they're seedling stage, post-emerge, there's some cultivations. As adults, it's mainly managed through crop competitions, roguing. Harvest weed seed destructors are now a real interesting option for some severe cases of water hemp and Palmer escapees. This has gotten to be a big issue in Arkansas. It's going to increase the expense, and it's going to slow your harvest down a lot. We want to get away from that, but we're looking at this here and even in Minnesota. Know when your weeds emerge. Various crop plantings and soybeans toward usually late April to early June. Kochia's here early. Giant ragweed. Here's water hemp. Late May, middle of July. And I've personally seen what appears to be some seedlings here in late August and early September. Now these we don't worry about too much because they don't have enough time to make seed. Those right there are going to be a problem. Devlin has 2 years of studies. We're going to look at 2020. We've collected 20 samples of water hemp that were already found to be herbicide resistant and collected seeds from those. 2021, he collected it from about 65 different locations across the state. He then took these seeds, planted them in the greenhouse, and exposed them to 1x rate or 3x rates of these particular herbicides: Raptor, Enlist 1, Extendamax, Atrex or Atrazine, Roundup, Liberty, Flexstar, and Callisto. If they survived 1x, but didn't survive 3x, if they survived 3x, they were found to be resistant. They didn't survive 1x, they were susceptible. If they survived 1x but didn't survive 3x, we kind of looked at them with a suspicious eye because we knew they're coming. Here's the results. Everything was resistant to a Raptor. Everything. 69% of them were resistant to Roundup. Now, you need to think a minute here. If everything's resistant to Raptor and 69% is resistant to Roundup, that means all these Roundups are 2X pathway. They're resistant to at least 2 herbicides. 24% were resistant to Atrax and Raptor. 12% were resistant to Callisto and Raptor. 11% are resistant to Flexstar and Raptor. Here's the one that's scary. 4% or 3 populations were resistant to Enlist 2, or Enlist 1, 2,4-D choline. We have a lot of Enlist acreage planted in Minnesota. And Raptor. We saw this example. XtendiMax resistant to 1X, but wasn't resistant to 3X. Enlist at 3X. This is 2020. This plant eventually died. But next year, another plant like this, 2020, grew to look like this. Here's what I was getting at. The one-way resistant herbicides, 28 of them, or 33%. They were only resistant to Raptor. Nothing else. Two-way, 30% were resistant to 2 different herbicides. 17 or 20% were resistant to 3 herbicides. 8% resistant to 4. 5%, 2% resistant to 5. 1% resistant to 6. We're resistant to 6 herbicides. Let me back this up a minute. And XtendiMax and Liberty, that means that guy was resistant to all of these. Resistance is going to be a continuing problem. We're losing tools quicker than we can create them. Devlin also submitted some slides on a study that he and Tom Peters are working at. Tom Peters is interested in weed control in soybeans because there's not much you can do in sugar beets. There's a lot of herbicide carryover entries, residual on sugar beets, pursuit on sugar beets. There's a lot of glyphosate-resistant weeds out there. And sugar beets just don't have much competitive ability against. So we've got limited herbicide choices in sugar beets, a definite need for integrated weed management, and we've got to target that seed bank. The objective was to evaluate the impact of soybean row spacing and herbicide program for weed control, soybean yield, and soybean sugar beet rotation. Tom stated if you want to control glyphosate-resistant water hemp and sugar beets, you got to start doing it in the previous crop. You've got to knock those weed seed banks down before you go to sugar beets, or you're going to take a hit on sugar beets. I see a lot of nodding in agreement here. Studies were done in Franklin, 2021. Rosemont, 2022. Moorhead in 21-22, but that data is yet to be analyzed. The crop management part, or our integrated weed management, looked at row spacing, of 22 inches or 15. The crop was in list 3 soybeans. Then we had 3 weed control or herbicide programs. A low input herbicide, which is a pre-emerge with the post-emerge, but the post-emerge did not have residual. A high input herbicide with the post-emerge or pre-emerge with residual and a post-emerge with residual, followed by enlist or glyphosate. Then a high input package with a harvest weed seed destructor. Low input package was Valor or Outlook. Valor followed by Enlist 1. Outlook followed by Durango. Notice neither one of those have any soil residual. High input Valor followed by Cobra and Warrant, followed by Enlist and Durango. Verdict followed by Liberty and Warrant. And then the integrated weed management, high input plus harvest weed seed destructor. Verdict followed by Liberty and Warrant, followed by water hemp seed removal at harvest. What did row spacing get us? Well, in 2021 and 2022, the narrow road spacing, wider road spacing at 22 inches, narrow, wide. This was a dry year. This was a wet, dry year. Cumulative growing degree days for 90% canopy closure. 2021, 1317 for narrow road, 1735. Basically, with the narrow row width, we've got canopy closure quicker. One of the things that we found, row spacing, or this set of row spacing difference, is 7-inch difference between 22 and 15, did not impact water hemp. Now this is for 2 years. But squeezing down below 20 just didn't get us the kick we were hoping for. Our herbicide programs, water hemp control. 2021 in Franklin, we had a pretty decent control with all of the herbicide treatments. 2022 at Rosemont. Look at the control of the Outlook in Durango. Non-treated control is a weedy mess. The Valor and the Verdict actually did a pretty decent job controlling it in 22. You start looking at the Outlook in Durango. It looks pretty decent. You see some ground cover, but if you start looking at the leaf shapes, here, right in through there, you can see the weeds coming. Water hemp seed production. Non-treated control, we were at over 1.5 million seed per meter square, which is basically 1.5 million, 2 million seed per square yard. In 2021 in Franklin, herbicide program worked. 2022, it worked. But we're seeing this Durango, it knocked it down from our untreated control, but we're still looking at .1 million seed, or 100,000 seed per cubic yard, or per square yard. How many water hemp seed does it take before you have a train wreck in sugar beets? yield, narrow row width, this is Franklin. Narrow row width really made an impact in yield in 2022 and 21. Our herbicide yields, 2021, we see a champion with the verdict, see a train wreck with the no, we see a lot of variation. 2022, our 3 high input gave us more yield. Our moderate input gave us lower yield. Weed-free control gave us like the our input. And then we got hammered with no tree. Take-home messages. We're going to have problems with water hemp for a while. Proactive integrated weed management tactics should be implemented. You've got to do something besides depend strictly on herbicides. We saw a pretty good input from this layered herbicide program that the universities have been discussing. We see the need for something like the weed seed, harvest weed seed control, electrocution, possibly to some desiccants, something to knock those final weed seeds down and control that weed seed bank. This is what I'm going to tell most of you to start looking at. Look at things other than what you've been doing. Next study comes from Andrew Leake. Residual herbicides, conventional variable rate technology, bank mix, crop safety and efficacy on water hemp. This is the fifth year Andrew's been working on this project. He started off with the 2-pass residual program, saw some activity, started looking at single rate applications with variable and residual skills, looked at a standard curve-based variable. Then he took the previous results from these previous and he developed these champion variable rate tank mixes in a dry year. Repeated again this year in a wet, dry year. A lot of his pre's did, same thing most of you had in 2021. A lot of your pre's just didn't work. You didn't get the rainfall to get them activated. So we repeated it. Target was to look at crop safety of PPO heavy microweight champions. Basically, he found, contrary to his title, he did not find crop safety with these herbicides to be that big of an issue. Now, this is one site in Renville County. Your mileage may vary. Just a second, Angie. Go ahead and hit it. Let's just grab this a little bit. First 4 dates, columns here, are an average of both years. Last column, after treatment, rating after 56 days after the initial treatment for 2022. Application code A means a single at planting. B is applied about 3-4 weeks after planting. Look at the structure here. He's got Valor, Warrant, Residual, and he's got them applied to all at planting. And Valor, Warrant, Residual, Flexstar, post plant, split it up with Variant Warrant, Valor, Warrant, and Residual at planting and residual flex post plant. You just see a structure. Then he changed the rate of the Valor, changed his rate sums. Then he looked at Blanket, Valor, Warrant, Flex, Star. Again, at planting and post-plant, broke it down the same way, and then changed his rate of his herbicides. When you look at this, we had better than 80% weed control with all treatments. So we didn't have a single failure in the group. Three treatments were less than 85%. An additional 5 treatments were less than 90. We're left with 8 treatments that are above 95% weed control. Let me back it up for me, Angie. When you look at this, he's successful in controlling water hemp with all of these treatments. 2 of these treatments, we add FlexStar, really cleaned it up. All it costs is money. Weed control, the herbicide mixtures varied from $29 per acre up to $46 per acre. These can be used with most herbicide soybeans. Now, I'm not going to talk about sugar beets. Some of you crop CCAs up there. Which one of these packages would be a disaster on sugar beets? But it gives us some hope. This layered system, a pre-emerge followed with residual, followed by a post-emerge with residual, really helps with water hemp control. This is 21 data had failure to weed. 22 data, 80% of the entries achieved 90+ weed control. 45% of the entries achieving 95% weed control or better. And when this single pre-emerge, which is different from the layered system, this only worked and achieved 95% if you use at least 3 different residuals. This is where the crop safety issue is going to come in. You change the soil types, you have higher in sand, lower in organic matter, you could see some dinging of those soybeans pretty hard. How am I doing on time? I got about 10 minutes, just a few minutes. Zip through this one real quick. Managing voluntary corn in 2,4-D. As you drive from Grand Forks down to Wisconsin, escape corn gets to be a bigger and bigger issue, voluntary corn. More questions and answers, a lot of variation from year to year, variable success. Been further complicated by the adoption of growth regulators. Here's a kicker. Antagonism is known to occur with 2,4-D when mixed with grass herbicides, Assure especially, Select Max. Let me sift through here. According to my stuff, we got just a minute or two. The untreated controls is number 1. Weed free is number 2. 2 through 9 is 2,4-D plus clethodim with the low rates, then a high rate, low rate, and a high rate, mixed with S-metolachlor, and then change your surfactants to AMS and then non-ions or AMS plus a crop oil concentrate. When you drop down here to Assure 2, the high rate and the low rate, there's this. Here's the slide we want to look at. Herbicide antagonism is a known entity. And as we start moving to these more complicated herbicide mixtures, you saw what Andrew had up there. We're going to see more and more of this as we complicate our mixtures because we're doing multiple chemistries. And then when you throw in your differences in water, your hard water is going to be different from his hard water. And his soft water is going to be completely different from everything. When you throw that, we're going to see more antagonism. It's going to happen because people are getting desperate to control these herbicide-resistant weeds. So take-home message is resistance is here. Seed weed bank management is going to be critical, and we cannot use the same thing the same way year after year, crop after crop, or we lose that tool. Any questions? Yes, sir. We're working on that through time. Right now, we're looking at keep doing this, trying to keep it within the span of what's doable today. If you start going back to what you're talking about cultivation, and you talk to some of our larger guys, they're going to say the first issue is, I don't have time to cultivate. And it's a fact. You've got so much stuff to do in the first 6 weeks of planting and managing that crop that throwing in a cultivation trip in there could sink it. Now, I will agree that it's going to come. We're going to have to be looking at that, but we're going to have to incorporate it with the data management systems that we now have, the ability to control where the tractor goes is so much greater than it was 25 years ago, much less 50 years ago when iron blight was a problem with me. You smile because you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, it's going to be in the future, and they're looking at harvest weed seed construction. But the other thing you look at with the cultivation, and I see it up here a lot, if you're going to cultivate, you're going to compact. Which is a bigger problem for you, compaction or weeds? Those are some things we've got to consider when we look at these projects. But eventually we will be funding some of those projects that you're talking about.